The morning sun shone bright over New Haven Colony as Tommy Brooks ran through the Central Park with his friends. The 8-year-old boy laughed as he chased after a ball, his blonde hair bouncing with each step. Around him, other children played on swings and slides while their parents watched from nearby benches. New Haven was a peaceful place. The human settlement sat on the planet's largest continent, surrounded by rolling green hills and crystal-clear rivers. 50,000 people called this world home. Most worked in the vast farming fields that stretched beyond the town, growing food that fed colonies across 3 star systems. Others worked in the research labs, studying new crops and better farming methods. Tommy's mother, Lisa, worked at one of these labs. She was a plant scientist who helped develop crops that could grow in different climates. Every morning she would drop Tommy off at the park before heading to work. The park was safe, and many other parents did the same thing. Children played together while adults took care of the colony's business. The Cathari Empire controlled the space around New Haven. These tall, reptilian aliens had ruled this part of the galaxy for hundreds of years. They looked like giant lizards that walked on 2 legs with sharp teeth and claws. Most stood over 7 feet tall and had thick, scaly skin that could stop small weapons. For 12 years, the humans in Cathari had gotten along well enough. The aliens mostly ignored the human colony, and the humans stayed out of Cathari business. Trade ships moved back and forth without problems. Diplomatic messages were polite and brief. Both sides seemed happy with this arrangement. Colony Administrator Jake Miller ran New Haven's government from a simple building near the park. He was a calm man in his 50s who had helped build the colony from nothing. Jake believed in talking through problems rather than fighting. He had met with Cathari officials several times over the years, and those meetings had always ended peacefully. Jake did not know that things were about to change forever. King Vexthor of the Cathari Empire was not like the officials Jake had met. The king was a warrior who had spent his life conquering other worlds. He believed that strength was the only thing that mattered in the universe. In his mind, any species that could not defend itself deserved to be conquered. The king had been watching human colonies for months. His spies reported that humans were weak fighters who preferred farming to warfare. They had few weapons and no large military ships in this region. Their colonies were soft targets, perfect for expansion. Vexthor's advisors had warned him about attacking humans. They knew that Earth had a powerful military, even if the colonies did not. Some advisors suggested that conquering human territory might bring Earth's warships to their borders. The king laughed at these warnings. Earth was many light years away. By the time they learned what happened, it would be too late to stop him. The king's plan was simple. He would attack New Haven with overwhelming force, capture the colony quickly, and present Earth with a finished conquest. Earth would have to accept the loss rather than fight a war they could not win so far from home. Other human colonies would surrender without a fight once they saw what happened to New Haven. On this peaceful morning, Tommy and his friends had no idea that death was coming from space. The children played their games while overhead, reality began to shift. Space itself seemed to ripple as massive ships dropped out of hyperspace. The first person to notice was Maria Santos, who worked at the colony's communication center. She was checking routine messages when her equipment detected massive energy signatures above the planet. Her screen showed contacts that were far too big to be normal trade ships. Maria's hands shook as she activated the emergency broadcast system. Her voice echoed across the colony from speakers in every building and street corner. "Attention all residents. Unknown ships have entered our system. Please remain calm and stay close to emergency shelters. This is not a drill." Tommy stopped playing and looked up at the sky with his friends. Other children and adults did the same. At first they saw nothing but blue sky and white clouds. Then shadows began to fall across the park as enormous shapes blocked out the sun. Cathari warships were unlike anything humans had built. They looked like giant metal predators, all sharp angles and weapon ports. The smallest ship was twice the size of New Haven's largest building. The flagship, where King Vexthor commanded his fleet, was a kilometer long and bristled with enough weapons to destroy cities. People in the park began to panic. Parents grabbed their children and ran toward the emergency shelters that had been built around the colony. These shelters were designed to protect against natural disasters, not military attacks, but they were the only safe places available. Lisa Brooks saw the ships from her lab window and immediately thought of Tommy. She dropped her work and ran toward the park. pushing through crowds of frightened people, moving in the opposite direction. Her only thought was reaching her son before something terrible happened. Jake Miller stood in his office, staring up at the alien fleet through his window. He had never seen so many warships in one place. His hands trembled as he activated the colony's emergency communication system, sending a message toward Earth that would take weeks to arrive through normal space. The message was simple. New Haven under attack by Cathari fleet. Request immediate assistance. Jake did not know that New Haven's quantum communication array had already sent a much faster message. Every human colony and ship was connected by these instant communication networks. Earth Defense Command was watching everything that happened in real time, seeing the same view that Jake saw from his window. King Vexthor stood on his flagship's bridge, looking down at the human colony with satisfaction. The settlement looked even weaker than his spies had reported. The buildings were made for comfort, not defense. The people were running around like frightened animals instead of organizing resistance. Prepare the landing forces, the king commanded his officers. This will be easier than I expected. The Cathari troops were already suited up and ready to deploy. Each warrior stood 8 feet tall in powered armor that made them look like walking tanks. Their weapons could cut through most materials, and their armor could stop anything the humans might have. As the first landing ships launched from the fleet, Tommy Brooks was still in the park with several other children. The emergency shelters were overcrowded, and some families had not made it inside before the doors sealed. These families huddled behind buildings and playground equipment, hoping the aliens would not notice them. Tommy looked around for his mother but could not see her in the chaos. The 8-year-old boy was scared but tried to be brave like his father had taught him. His father was a cargo pilot who traveled between colonies, and he had told Tommy that being brave meant protecting others even when you were afraid. The landing ships touched down in the park's center, crushing playground equipment under their weight. Massive doors opened with loud hissing sounds, and Cathari warriors began marching out in formation. The last peaceful day in New Haven's history was about to end. The ground shook as the huge Cathari landing ships settled into New Haven's Central Park. Steam hissed from their engines while massive doors opened with mechanical groans. The first alien warriors to emerge stood nearly 8 feet tall in their dark combat armor. Their reptilian faces were hidden behind helmets, but their glowing red eyes were visible through the visors. King Vexthor stepped out of the largest ship, his golden armor marking him as the leader. Unlike his soldiers, he wore no helmet, wanting the humans to see his face clearly. His scales were dark green with silver markings that showed his royal bloodline. Sharp teeth filled his mouth, and his claws could tear through metal. The few humans still in the park froze in terror. Children who had not made it to the shelters hid behind trees and playground equipment. Parents clutched their sons and daughters close, hoping the aliens would not notice them. Jake Miller emerged from the colony administration building with his hands raised in the universal gesture of peace. He walked slowly toward the alien force, his heart pounding but his face calm. Behind him, a small group of colony officials followed at a distance. "I am Administrator Jake Miller," he called out in a steady voice. "I speak for this colony. We mean you no harm and wish to avoid any conflict." King Vexthor looked down at the human with amusement. The creature was so small and weak, barely reaching the king's chest even in his armor. The alien ruler had conquered dozens of worlds, and the pattern was always the same. Show overwhelming force and most species would surrender without a fight. "I am King Vexthor of the Cathari Empire," the alien replied, his voice deep and threatening. "This world now belongs to us. Your people will leave immediately or they will be removed by force." Jake's mind raced as he tried to find words that might save his people. "Your Majesty, this colony has existed peacefully for 12 years. We have trade agreements with your empire. Surely we can reach some arrangement that benefits both our peoples?" The king's laughter was a harsh, rasping sound. "Arrangements are for equals, human. Your species is weak. You build farms where we will build breeding grounds for our young. You study plants while we study warfare. There is no arrangement between predator and prey." Around the park, Cathari soldiers spread out in a wide circle. Their weapons were drawn but not yet aimed at specific targets. They moved with the confidence of warriors who had never lost a battle. Some pointed their scanners at the emergency shelters, counting the humans hiding inside. Tommy Brooks was crouched behind a swing set with 3 other children. The metal bars provided little protection, but it was the only cover available. The 8-year-old watched the aliens with wide eyes, trying to understand what was happening. His mother had told him about the Cathari, but she had said they were friends who lived far away. Lisa Brooks was fighting her way through panicked crowds 3 blocks from the park. People were running in all directions, some toward the shelters and others toward the colony's edge. She pushed past adults much larger than herself, focused only on reaching her son. King Vexthor grew impatient with Jake's attempts at negotiation. The human's words reminded him too much of the weak officials who had advised against this attack. In the king's experience, mercy was seen as weakness, and weakness invited more challenges to his rule. Enough talking, Vexthor snarled. Your people have 30 seconds to come out of hiding and submit to Cathari rule. Those who refuse will be made examples for the others. Jake's face went pale. Please, Your Majesty, most of our people are civilians. We have children here who have done nothing wrong. Children grow into adults, the king replied coldly. Adults who remember defeat become either loyal servants or dangerous enemies. It is better to teach lessons that will be remembered forever. The 30 seconds passed in silence. The humans in the shelters could hear everything through the emergency communication system, but none dared to come out. They knew that surrender meant slavery at best, death at worst. Their only hope was that Earth might somehow send help, though that seemed impossible given the distance. King Vexthor nodded to his soldiers. Begin the demonstration. Start with the ones hiding in the open. Several Cathari warriors began moving toward the trees and playground equipment where families were hiding. Their heavy footsteps crushed the grass beneath their armored boots. Parents held their children tighter, knowing there was nowhere left to run. Tommy Brooks made a decision that would change galactic history. The 8-year-old boy saw the aliens coming toward his hiding spot and panicked. Instead of staying still, he jumped up and ran toward the center of the park, calling for his mother. Mom, where are you? Tommy's young voice echoed across the park as he ran between the alien soldiers. His small legs carried him surprisingly fast, but he was running in the wrong direction, toward the landing ships instead of away from them. King Vexthor turned toward the sound and saw a small human child running directly toward him. The boy had blonde hair and was wearing a red shirt with blue pants. He looked exactly like the weak, helpless creatures the king despised most. In Cathari culture, showing mercy to enemies was considered a sign of weakness that could undermine a leader's authority. King Vexthor had ruled his empire for 20 years by never showing weakness, never backing down, and never letting challenges go unpunished. The running child represented everything the king wanted to destroy about humanity. They were soft, emotional, and dependent on others for protection. They wasted resources on the young and weak instead of focusing on strength and conquest. They built parks for children to play in instead of training grounds for warriors. Stop, the king commanded, but Tommy was too frightened and confused to obey. The boy continued running, tears streaming down his face as he searched for his mother. Jake Miller realized what was about to happen and started running toward Tommy. No, he's just a child, please. King Vexthor drew his plasma weapon, a sleek device that could vaporize anything it hit. The weapon hummed with deadly energy as it powered up. Around the park, human voices began screaming and begging for mercy. Let this be a lesson in Cathari power, the king announced, his voice carrying across the entire colony through the communication system. This is what happens to those who defy us. Lisa Brooks reached the edge of the park just in time to see her son running toward the alien king. She screamed Tommy's name and started running toward him, but she was too far away. Jake Miller was closer, but still not close enough. Tommy stopped running when he saw the weapon pointed at him. The 8-year-old boy looked up at the towering alien king with confusion, rather than understanding. He did not know what the device in the king's hand was for. He only knew that he wanted his mother. Please, Tommy said in his small voice. I just want my mom. King Vexthor felt no emotion as he pulled the trigger. In his mind, he was teaching a necessary lesson about power and submission. The plasma bolt struck Tommy Brooks in the chest and the child's body disappeared in a flash of brilliant light. The park fell silent except for Lisa Brooks's scream of anguish. She collapsed to her knees at the edge of the park, staring at the spot where her son had been standing. Jake Miller stopped running and stood frozen in shock and horror. King Vexthor holstered his weapon and looked around at the terrified humans. Now you understand the price of defiance. Submit to Cathari rule and no more of your young will die. What the king did not know was that Tommy Brooks's death had been recorded by dozens of security cameras throughout the colony. The footage was automatically transmitted through the quantum communication network to every human settlement, ship and station in known space. Within seconds, the image of an alien king deliberately murdering a human child was playing on screens across dozens of worlds. Military commanders watched in horror as the 8-year-old boy died for no reason other than to demonstrate alien power. On Luna Base, Admiral Kate Foster received the transmission and felt something cold settle in her chest. She had children of her own, and she knew that what she had just witnessed would change everything between humans and aliens forever. The 5-minute countdown to the end of the Cathari Empire had begun. The quantum communication pulse carrying Tommy Brooks' final moments reached Earth in less than a second. Unlike regular radio signals that took years to cross space, quantum networks connected human settlements instantly across any distance. Every colony, ship, and station received the same horrifying footage at the same time. Admiral Kate Foster was reviewing supply reports in her office on Luna Base when her emergency communication system activated. The screens around her desk lit up with incoming priority signals from across human space. As the head of Earth Defense Command, she received hundreds of messages every day, but nothing like this. The first transmission came from New Haven's automatic systems. Security cameras throughout the colony had recorded everything that happened in the park. The footage was crystal clear, showing King Vexthor deliberately targeting and killing 8-year-old Tommy Brooks while the child begged for his mother. Kate watched the recording 3 times, her face growing harder with each viewing. She had 2 daughters of her own, ages 7 and 10. The thought of any alien creature harming human children filled her with a cold rage that she had never felt before. The Admiral's fingers moved across her control panel, activating Emergency Protocol 7. This protocol had been created after the first contact wars 50 years ago, when humanity learned that not all alien species could be reasoned with. Protocol 7 was reserved for acts of genocide against human civilians. Red lights began flashing throughout Luna Base as the emergency signal went out. Every human military installation within 50 light-years received the same message: civilian genocide in progress. All units respond immediately. Rules of engagement: unlimited warfare authorized. Captain Ryan Clark was conducting training exercises with his ship, the UES Liberty, in the Centauri system when the emergency signal arrived. The Liberty was Earth's newest dreadnought, a massive warship designed to fight entire fleets by itself. Its railguns could crack planets, and its shields could withstand direct hits from nuclear weapons. Ryan was on the bridge reviewing his crew's performance when Lieutenant Amy Green burst through the doors. Her face was pale and her hands were shaking as she handed him a datapad containing the transmission from New Haven. "Sir, you need to see this immediately," Amy said, her voice barely controlled. Ryan took the pad and watched the footage of Tommy's death. His own daughter Amy was 8 years old, the same age as the murdered boy. He had joined the military to protect human colonies from exactly this kind of attack. The fact that he had failed to prevent it filled him with guilt and fury. "Sound general quarters," Ryan commanded, his voice deadly calm. "All hands to battle stations. Plot a course for New Haven, maximum speed." "Sir, that will take us deep into Cathari space," Lieutenant Green warned. "We'll be outnumbered at least 10 to 1. Ryan's expression did not change. "Plot the course, Lieutenant. We're going to make sure this never happens again." Throughout human space, similar scenes were playing out on hundreds of ships and stations. The murder of Tommy Brooks had touched something deep in the human psyche, a protective instinct that went back to humanity's earliest days. When children were threatened, humans did not calculate odds or consider diplomacy. They fought. The UES Hammer was patrolling the outer colonies when Captain Susan Davis received the emergency signal. Her ship was older than the Liberty but carried twice as many Marines. Within minutes of seeing the footage, she had changed course for New Haven and was broadcasting recruitment messages to nearby civilian ships. "This is Captain Davis of the UES Hammer," her message said. "Any ship capable of carrying weapons or troops report to New Haven immediately. We have human children to protect." Cargo haulers, mining vessels, and even luxury cruise ships began altering their courses. Captains who had never fired a shot in anger were volunteering to fight against an alien empire. The murder of one child had awakened something in humanity that their enemies had not expected. Dr. Mark Thompson was studying alien biology on Research Station Beta when the news arrived. He was not a soldier, but he was an expert on Cathari physiology. Within an hour, he was broadcasting detailed information about Cathari weak points to every human military unit in space. Their armor has cooling vents near the neck and under the arms, Mark's message explained. Their scales are thickest on the front but thinner on the sides. Aim for the joints and the base of the skull for maximum effect. Back on New Haven, King Vexthor was enjoying his victory. The human colonists had finally emerged from their shelters and were kneeling in the park where Tommy had died. Their faces showed the proper fear and submission that the king expected from conquered peoples. You see how simple this could have been, Vexthor told Jake Miller, who knelt with the others. One small demonstration and your people become reasonable. Jake did not reply. His eyes were fixed on the spot where Tommy Brooks had been vaporized. The grass was burned black in a perfect circle, and the smell of ozone still hung in the air. Jake had failed to protect his people, and a child had died because of his failure to act sooner. Lisa Brooks knelt near the edge of the group, tears streaming down her face. Other colonists tried to comfort her, but there were no words that could ease the pain of losing a child. She stared at the alien king with a mixture of grief and hatred that burned in her chest like acid. King Vexthor's communication officer approached with a worried expression. Your Majesty, we're detecting unusual energy signatures at the edge of the system. Multiple contacts approaching at high speed. The king dismissed the concern with a wave of his clawed hand. Probably merchant ships fleeing the area. Humans are cowards who run from the first sign of trouble. Sir, these signatures are much larger than merchant vessels. They appear to be military ships. Vexthor's confidence began to waver. His intelligence reports had said that Earth maintained no significant military presence in this region. The nearest human naval base was supposed to be weeks away, even at maximum speed. How many ships? The king asked. We count at least 12 contacts, Your Majesty. More are appearing every few minutes. On Luna Base, Admiral Kate Foster was coordinating the largest military response in human history. Ships were converging on New Haven from every direction, their crews driven by a shared fury that transcended normal military discipline. The quantum communication network allowed Kate to speak directly with every ship captain in real time. Her voice was calm and professional, but everyone who heard it could sense the cold anger beneath her words. This is Admiral Foster to all units, she broadcast. You have seen what the Cathari did to Tommy Brooks. That child was under our protection and we failed him. We will not fail the other children of New Haven. Show these aliens what happens when they threaten human families. The response from the fleet captains was immediate and unanimous. Understood, Admiral. No mercy. Captain Ryan Clark's Liberty was the first ship to reach the edge of the New Haven system. Through his view screen, he could see the Cathari fleet in orbit around the planet. The alien ships were impressive, but Ryan had fought worse odds before. Communications. Open a channel to all human ships, Ryan ordered. Channel open, sir. This is Captain Clark aboard the Liberty. In approximately 2 minutes, we will engage the enemy fleet. Remember what we're fighting for. Remember Tommy Brooks. Make every shot count. The human fleet began emerging from hyperspace around New Haven like avenging angels. Ship after ship materialized in flashes of blue light, their weapons already charging for combat. The Cathari had expected to face a small colonial defense force. Instead, they found themselves confronting the full might of human military fury. King Vexthor stood on his bridge, watching in growing alarm as more human ships appeared. His fleet outnumbered the humans, but these were military vessels with experienced crews. The energy readings from their weapons were higher than anything in his intelligence reports. Your Majesty, his tactical officer reported, the humans are not requesting surrender terms or attempting to negotiate. They're moving directly to attack formation. For the first time since the assault began, Vexthor felt a touch of fear. He had expected Earth to protest diplomatically or demand compensation for the colony. He had not expected them to send their entire regional fleet for an immediate counterattack. Open communications with the human fleet, the king ordered. Perhaps we can still reach an understanding. The communication channel crackled to life and Captain Clark's voice filled the Cathari bridge. There was no anger in his tone, just a cold certainty that chilled Vexthor to his bones. This is Captain Ryan Clark of the United Earth ship Liberty. You have murdered a human child under our protection. There will be no negotiation, no surrender terms, and no mercy. Prepare to face the consequences of your actions. The channel closed, leaving King Vexthor staring at a tactical display that showed him just how badly he had miscalculated. The human fleet was moving into attack position with military precision that spoke of years of training and experience. Tommy Brooks had been dead for exactly 4 minutes and 30 seconds. In 30 more seconds, his death would be avenged. The first human weapon to fire was the Liberty's main railgun. Captain Ryan Clark had waited exactly 5 minutes since Tommy Brooks's death before giving the order to attack. He wanted the Cathari to understand that this was not random violence, but calculated justice. The railgun fired a solid tungsten projectile at 20% the speed of light. The projectile struck King Vexthor's flagship before the Cathari sensors could even detect it. The alien ship's shields, designed to stop energy weapons and missiles, offered no protection against a chunk of metal moving at relativistic speeds. The projectile punched through the flagship's hull like paper, tearing through deck after deck before exiting the other side. Emergency alarms screamed throughout the ship as atmosphere vented into space through the massive holes. Secondary explosions began tearing the vessel apart from the inside. Direct hit on the enemy flagship, Lieutenant Green reported from the Liberty's weapons station. Their shields are down and they're venting atmosphere. Ryan nodded grimly. Target their engines. I want that ship disabled, not destroyed. We need their king alive to answer for what he did. Around New Haven, the rest of the human fleet opened fire in a coordinated assault that overwhelmed the Cathari defenses. Human military doctrine emphasized speed and overwhelming firepower in the opening moments of combat. The idea was to destroy enemy resistance before they could organize an effective response. The UES Hammer unleashed a full spread of quantum torpedoes at a Cathari cruiser. The alien ship's energy shields absorbed the first 2 impacts, but the third torpedo overloaded their generators. The fourth and fifth torpedoes tore through the unprotected hull, gutting the ship from bow to stern. Captain Susan Davis watched with satisfaction as the Cathari cruiser broke apart. "Launch all fighters," she ordered. "I want those transports disabled before they can retreat." Human fighter squadrons poured out of the larger ships like angry hornets. The small, fast ships were designed for exactly this kind of operation. They swarmed over the Cathari fleet, targeting engines and weapon systems with surgical precision. Lieutenant Commander Paul Smith led Red Squadron against a group of Cathari destroyers. His fighter was built for speed and maneuverability rather than heavy firepower, but it carried enough missiles to cripple ships 10 times its size. Red Squadron. "This is Red Leader," Paul broadcast to his pilots. "Remember, we're not just fighting for the colony. We're fighting for every human child who might face these monsters in the future. Make them pay." The human fighters danced between the larger ships, too fast for the Cathari weapons to track effectively. Missile after missile struck home, disabling engines and weapon systems. Within minutes, half the alien fleet was drifting helplessly in space. On the surface of New Haven, King Vexthor felt his flagship shudder under the impacts from space. He could hear his officers shouting damage reports, but the words seemed to come from very far away. Everything he had planned was falling apart. "Your Majesty," his ground commander reported, "the humans in orbit have achieved space superiority. Our fleet is being systematically destroyed." Vexthor's claws scraped against the metal floor as he struggled to understand what had happened. His intelligence reports had been completely wrong about human military capabilities. These were not the weak farmers he had expected to conquer. "How long until our reinforcements arrive?" the king demanded. "Sir, the nearest fleet is 3 days away. At the current rate of damage, we'll be completely defeated within the hour." Above the planet, Admiral Kate Foster's voice reached every human ship through the quantum communication network. She was coordinating the battle from Luna Base, watching the tactical displays with cold satisfaction. "All units, this is Admiral Foster. Focus fire on their command ships first, then their troop transports. I want their ground forces cut off from any hope of evacuation." The human fleet adjusted its targeting priorities with mechanical precision. Ship after ship in the Cathari fleet found itself under concentrated fire from multiple human vessels. The aliens had superior numbers, but the humans had superior technology, training, and motivation. The Cathari tried to fight back, but their weapons were designed for different types of combat. They preferred close-range energy battles where their superior ship size would give them an advantage. The humans fought at long range with kinetic weapons that could punch through any defense. Captain Clark watched the tactical display on the Liberty's bridge with professional satisfaction. The battle was proceeding exactly as human doctrine demanded. The enemy fleet was being systematically dismantled while the human ships took minimal damage. "Sir, the enemy flagship is trying to establish communications," Lieutenant Green reported. "Put them through," Ryan ordered. He wanted to hear what the alien king had to say for himself. King Vexthor's image appeared on the main screen, his scaled face showing the first signs of real fear. Behind him, smoke filled the bridge of his damaged flagship. Emergency lights cast everything in a hellish red glow. "Captain Clark," the king began, his voice no longer carrying its earlier arrogance. "Perhaps we can discuss terms." The death of the child was unfortunate, but surely we can reach an understanding between our peoples. Ryan's expression did not change. "Your Majesty, 3 hours ago you murdered an 8-year-old boy to demonstrate your power. Did you think there would be no consequences?" "I am prepared to offer compensation," Vexthor said desperately. "Territory, resources, technology. Name your price for peace between our peoples." "The price," Ryan replied coldly, "is justice. You will surrender unconditionally, and you will face trial for the murder of Tommy Brooks." The king's fear turned to rage. "You dare demand that I surrender to inferior beings? I am Vexthor, ruler of 1,000 worlds." "You are a child killer," Ryan said simply. "And child killers do not get to negotiate." The communication ended as another human weapon struck the flagship. Vexthor was thrown to the deck as his bridge erupted in sparks and flame. Around him, his officers were abandoning their posts as the ship began to break apart. On the surface of New Haven, the Cathari ground forces were receiving desperate orders from their dying fleet. Some commanders wanted to fight to the death, while others suggested surrendering to avoid the fate of their comrades in space. Major Paul Smith led Alpha Company of Earth's 42nd Marine Regiment down to the planet's surface. The Marines had been aboard the Liberty when the emergency signal came through. They were elite soldiers who specialized in exactly this kind of operation. Paul's company materialized in New Haven's park through military transporters, appearing in flashes of blue light around the Cathari positions. The aliens found themselves surrounded by human soldiers whose equipment and training far exceeded anything they had expected to face. "This is Major Smith of the Earth Defense Force," Paul announced through his suit's speakers. "You are surrounded and cut off from any hope of escape. Surrender now, and you will be treated according to the laws of war." The Cathari warriors looked around at the human soldiers with growing desperation. These humans wore powered armor that made them nearly as tall as Cathari, and their weapons hummed with deadly energy. More importantly, their movements showed the confidence of soldiers who had never lost a battle. "We demand safe passage off this world," the Cathari ground commander replied. "We are soldiers, not criminals." Paul's voice was as cold as the space between stars. "Soldiers don't murder children. You have 30 seconds to drop your weapons and surrender." Several Cathari warriors looked toward their king for orders, but Vexthor was too busy trying to save his own life to command his troops. The flagship was falling apart around him, and he could see escape pods launching from other ships in his fleet. 10 seconds, Paul announced. One by one, the Cathari warriors began dropping their weapons. They were professional soldiers who understood when a battle was lost. Their king had led them into a disaster, and now they faced the choice between death and surrender. King Vexthor himself stood in the center of the park where Tommy Brooks had died. The grass around him was still burned black from his plasma weapon. Human Marines surrounded him with their weapons trained on his chest. For the first time in his life, the king of the Cathari Empire was completely powerless. The weak humans he had despised had destroyed his fleet, captured his soldiers, and cornered him in the same spot where he had committed murder. "Your Majesty," Major Smith said, his voice carrying no respect for the alien's title, "you are under arrest for the murder of Tommy Brooks and the unprovoked attack on New Haven Colony." Vexthor looked around at the human soldiers and finally understood the magnitude of his mistake. He had thought humans were weak because they valued peace over conquest. He had not realized that this same nature would make them utterly ruthless when their children were threatened. The king's empire was falling apart in space above him, his fleet destroyed, his soldiers captured, all because he had killed one human child to demonstrate his power. The demonstration had worked, but not the way he had intended. King Vexthor died exactly 5 minutes and 12 seconds after he murdered Tommy Brooks. Major Paul Smith pulled the trigger on his plasma rifle, and the alien king collapsed in the same spot where the 8-year-old boy had fallen. The symbolism was deliberate and brutal. The other Cathari warriors watched their leader die with a mixture of shock and understanding. They had followed Vexthor because he seemed strong and invincible. His death at the hands of the very humans he had called weak showed them just how wrong their king had been about everything. "Justice has been served," Paul announced through his communication system. The message went out to every human ship and station in the area, and then spread across the quantum network to Earth itself. Tommy Brooks had been avenged. Admiral Kate Foster received the message on Luna Base and felt some of the cold anger in her chest begin to ease. The child's death had been a tragedy that could never be undone. But at least the creature responsible would never harm another human family. "All ships, this is Admiral Foster," she broadcast to the fleet around New Haven. "Phase 1 is complete. Begin Phase 2 operations." Phase 2 was the systematic destruction of Cathari military power in the region. The human fleet had been reinforced by additional ships arriving through hyperspace every few minutes. What had started as a rescue mission was becoming a full military campaign. Captain Ryan Clark stood on the Liberty's bridge, watching as Cathari ships attempted to flee the system. His orders were clear. No alien vessel was to escape that might threaten human colonies in the future. "Target their engines," Ryan commanded. "I want them disabled, not destroyed. We'll need those ships as evidence of what happened here." The Liberty's weapons reached out across space, precisely targeting the fleeing vessels. One by one, the Cathari ships found themselves dead in space, their engines destroyed but their crews still alive. They would survive to face trial for their part in the attack on New Haven. On the planet's surface, the human Marines were processing hundreds of Cathari prisoners. The aliens had surrendered quickly once their king was dead and their fleet destroyed. Most were professional soldiers who understood that continued resistance would only lead to more death. Lisa Brooks walked slowly through the park where her son had died. The area had been cleared of aliens and weapons, but the burned circle in the grass remained. She knelt beside it and placed a small toy spaceship that Tommy had loved. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you," she whispered to the empty air. "But they paid for what they did. They all paid." Jake Miller found her there an hour later. The colony administrator had spent the day coordinating with the human military and making sure the surviving colonists received medical attention. Now he stood quietly beside the grieving mother. "The Marines are saying the entire Cathari Empire is falling apart," Jake said softly. When word spread that their king was dead, all the regional governors started fighting each other for control. Lisa nodded but didn't look up from the burned grass. "Good. Maybe other aliens will think twice before hurting our children." Across the galaxy, news of King Vexthor's death was spreading through diplomatic channels. The Cathari Empire had been a major power for centuries, controlling hundreds of worlds and commanding respect through fear. The fact that humans had destroyed it in a matter of hours sent shockwaves through every alien government. The Saphirian Trade Federation called an emergency council meeting to discuss the human problem. The Altarian Republic recalled all their ships from human space borders. Even the powerful Centauri Alliance began reviewing their treaties with Earth to ensure they contained no language that might be seen as threatening to human civilians. Dr. Elena Rodriguez was Earth's chief xenobiologist, and she found herself very busy in the days following the New Haven incident. Alien ambassadors who had never bothered to study human psychology were suddenly desperate to understand what had made humanity react so violently to a single death. "You must understand," Elena explained to a gathering of alien diplomats. "Humans evolved as social creatures who protect their young above all else. When you threaten human children, you're not just attacking individuals. You're attacking the foundation of our entire species." The Cathari ambassador, one of the few surviving nobles from Vexthor's court, listened with growing horror. His people had completely misunderstood humanity's nature, seeing their care for the weak as evidence of weakness rather than strength. "How were we to know?" the ambassador asked desperately. "Your colonies seem so peaceful, so defenseless." "That's exactly the point," Elena replied. "We build peaceful colonies because we're strong enough to protect them. The moment you proved we couldn't protect our children through peace, we switched to war." The aftermath of the New Haven incident changed galactic politics forever. Human space became a no-go zone for any species with aggressive tendencies. Trade continued, but now alien merchants approached human worlds with the same caution they would show near a supernova. Captain Susan Davis was promoted to admiral and given command of the New Haven Defense Fleet. Her ships patrolled the region constantly, making sure that every alien vessel understood the price of threatening human civilians. The UES Tommy Brooks, a new class of destroyer, was commissioned 6 months later. The ship's motto was simple: for the children. It served as a permanent reminder to the galaxy of what happened when humanity's protective instincts were triggered. Major Paul Smith left the military after the incident and became the director of New Haven's rebuilt colony. He oversaw the construction of a memorial park where Tommy Brooks had died, but he also made sure the colony was never again left defenseless. The memorial statue showed a young boy playing with a toy spaceship, his face turned toward the stars with wonder and hope. Beneath it, words were carved in a dozen languages. Tommy Brooks, age 8, he dreamed of flying among the stars. His death ensured that other children could dream safely. Lisa Brooks visited the memorial every day for the first year after Tommy's death. Gradually, she began to heal enough to help other families who had lost children in conflicts across human space. Her foundation provided support for families affected by violence, funded by donations from across the galaxy. Even former enemies contributed to the foundation. Kithari refugees scattered across space after their empire's collapse sent what little money they had. They understood that their species bore responsibility for Tommy's death, and they wanted to help prevent future tragedies. The boy's death had accomplished something that decades of diplomacy could not. It established clear boundaries that no alien species dared to cross. Human children were off limits, human civilians were protected, and human space was sovereign territory that would be defended with overwhelming force. Admiral Kate Foster retired from active duty 3 years after the incident. In her final speech to the Earth Defense Force, she spoke about the lessons learned from Tommy Brooks' death. "We failed one child," she said to the assembled officers. "We allowed him to die because we thought our enemies would share our respect for innocent life. We learned that day that peace is only possible when we have the strength to enforce it." The new defense protocols that emerged from the New Haven incident were strict and absolute. Any attack on human civilians would be met with immediate and overwhelming force. No negotiations, no second chances, no mercy for those who harmed the innocent. 20 years later, Tommy Brooks had become a legend throughout the galaxy. Alien children learned about the human boy whose death ended an empire. The story served as a cautionary tale about the consequences of underestimating humanity's protective nature. New Haven itself grew into one of the most prosperous colonies in human space. The world that had almost been conquered became a symbol of human resilience and determination. Families from across the galaxy came to visit Tommy's memorial and learn about the boy who changed galactic history. The burned circle in the grass had been preserved exactly as it was after Tommy's death. Grass had never grown there again, despite all attempts to replant it. Scientists could find no explanation for this phenomenon, but colonists believed the land itself remembered what had happened there. On the 20th anniversary of Tommy's death, representatives from every major alien government gathered at the memorial. They came to pay their respects to the child whose death had taught them the true nature of humanity. Lisa Brooks, now in her 50s and director of the children's foundation that bore her son's name, spoke to the gathered crowd. Her words were broadcast across the galaxy through the same quantum network that had carried the footage of Tommy's murder. "My son wanted to be a starship pilot," she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "He dreamed of exploring the galaxy and meeting new friends among the stars." His death ensured that other children could pursue those same dreams in safety. The memorial ceremony concluded with a moment of silence that was observed on hundreds of worlds. For exactly 5 minutes and 12 seconds, the entire galaxy paused to remember a boy who had lived only 8 years, but whose death had changed the course of history. Tommy Brooks had become the most important child in galactic history, not because of anything he had done, but because of what his death had